When I was a boy, I used to read a good many Horatio Alger's stories. It was thrilling to learn about the bootblacks and the newspaper vendors that rose to high positions in business and in society. If a boy were honest, if he had the soul of integrity, if he was ambitious to get ahead, there was apparently nothing that could stop him, because he was on the side of righteousness and righteousness was on his side. And we've tried to instill in our young people the idea that this is America. Pick out something that is worthwhile achieving and then gather together the get up and go that is necessary to achieve. Aim high. Nurture the ambition to conquer the object of your aim. To talk against anything that is so obviously virtuous is like talking against virtue itself, or arguing with the beauty of a rose. And yet the fact is that too much ambition can get us into trouble. Ted Ferris of the Old Trinity Church in Boston tells the story of a seminary student who went down to the Bowery one evening to preach. And after rising to very great heights of oratory in the delivery of his sermon, he concluded by reciting from Kipling, "If you can keep your head when all about you are losing theirs," and so on to that long list of ifs. When he was finished, a voice that was extremely well lubricated with the juices of the barley and the corn threw a question from the back of the room, and it was a good question. The question was, "Well, Parson, what if you can't? What if you can't?" He was saying, in fact, it's all very well for you to stand up there and speak about forcing your heart and nerve and sinew to serve your turn long after they are gone, and so hold on when there is nothing in you except the will which says to them, hold on. But what if you can't? What if you can't hold on? I hope someone got this man sobered up and got across to him the fact that only too frequently we give in too easily, and it is possible on many occasions to change the I can't to I can. But the question of that inebriated Bowery dweller is still a good one. There are some things that are just beyond our reach. Physically, mentally, temperamentally, there are limits as to how far we can go. And there are many parents that have made frustrated bundles of demoralization of children that they tried to make reach goals that it was never in them to reach. All of us have our limitations. All of us have goals that are beyond us. It may be true that a man's reach must exceed his grasp, or what's a heaven for? But he would better not make that reach so far beyond his grasp that it becomes ridiculous, or he's going to become a shivering neurotic. And behind many of the troubles that we have in our colleges and our universities, behind much of the neurotic tendency that seems to be in a great many of our young peoples today, are parents that are trying to make of their youngsters something that it was never in them to be. One's got to learn to come to terms with his limitations and not be fool enough to think that he's a superman, or because children belong to him, they must be super children. There are only 3 verses in the 131st Psalm. Apparently it is written by a man who is thinking in the areas that we're touching on today. Scholars believe that there's enough in the psalm to suggest that he was once a very ambitious man and he was extremely egotistical about it. Whether such a sense of superiority came from an innate ability or a listening too seriously to the compliments of others, we don't know. But a change took place. And he said, Lord, my heart is not haughty, nor mine eyes lofty. Neither do I exercise myself in great matters or in things too high for me. Surely I have behaved and quieted myself. The Revised Version makes it even plainer. My eyes are not raised too high. I do not occupy myself with things too great and too marvelous for me, but I have calmed and quieted my soul. He was saying, in effect, that he had taken a good look at himself and he wasn't going to allow himself to be frustrated by the impossible any longer. He had come to terms with his limitations. I believe that there are many areas that come to mind when we think in this matter. Aren't there those, for instance, who keep themselves in a constant state of unhappiness by trying to imitate someone else and to imitate some virtues or some abilities that are in other people that we just could never cultivate? Desiring this man's art and that man's scope. That's the way Shakespeare put it. You remember poor Willie and the Death of a Salesman? He kept telling his sons he could get any job he wanted. Why am I staying in this company so long? Simply because I've been here so long, I don't want to let them down. But if I wanted to leave them today, I could just go across the street and I could get a job. Well, he never was important. And he lived his life pretending to be like those who were important. He might have achieved it if he had recognized the limitations or if he had looked more carefully at himself. David, you see, might have taken the armor and the sword that was given to him by the king, and he could have gone out and fought Goliath with them and made a fool and a corpse out of himself. But David was a wise boy. David recognized that he had limitations as a shepherd boy. But he also knew that there were some strengths that a shepherd boy had that Goliath didn't have. He could use a slingshot and Goliath couldn't. So much misery has come from sheer covetousness and wanting to achieve what is in another, desiring this man's art and that man's scope. It wasn't in David to be Goliath, but it was in David to be David. And by concentrating on that, he eventually became a greater, you see, than did Goliath. Frequently we disparage the virtue that's in ourselves. We're so busy envying, so busy coveting what someone else has that we don't even see that which is ourselves. Oh, it doesn't always turn out that way, but believe me, people are happier trying to do it and failing than living their lives coveting the unattainable that's in somebody else. Then, too, advancing years bring limitations on us, and illness brings limitations on us, and we would better learn to come to terms with them. Not easy to accept the problems that are left following a long illness. I was in a hospital room a couple of weeks ago where a man had had a heart attack. His doctor was laying down the law to him and telling him the kind of life he was going to have to live. But the patient said, "I can't do that. I have a business to run." The fact is, when certain types of illness strike us, we would better do what the doctor tells us or else. And I hope mine's not listening this morning. Certainly, we'd like to go on living our lives, living them at peak level. But sometimes an obstacle is thrown into the pathway that slows us down a bit in areas where we had once gone full blast. And with the psalmist, we would better stop reaching to that which is too high for us. We would better be willing to occupy ourselves with that which is in our reach. But once one comes to terms with it and accepts it, he often discovers a richer level than he had ever known before. He discovers that there are some joys that the good Lord makes possible when one's traveling life at a little slower pace than when he was accepting whirl as king. My good friend Dr. Lowe of Minneapolis tells of two people in Arizona who had arthritis, an elderly man and an elderly woman. Every day he goes to his little workshop. Every day he turns out some little piece of beautiful furniture. His arthritis is so bad that he has to lean against the bench as he works. And his wife comes in and watches him in a wheelchair and sometimes uses the sandpaper to help him on that. But this man says that he never was quite so happy in his life. The pity is that there were so many joyless years, he said, when I did what I never cared to do. I think God intended us to come to terms with our limitations with an accent on the positive like that. So it is with increasing years. I suppose more people worry about getting old than anything else in the world. It's made the cosmetic firms and the dye firms very rich indeed. A woman is doing her work in the home, and her daughter comes over and takes the dust rag from her and tells her that she should sit down for a few moments, and the poor woman just doesn't know whether to be thankful or broken-hearted.
Vocational rehabilitation is for the handicapped. It fits them.
Or young people say to you, "Good morning, sir," with a deference that we'd expect to be reserved for the aged dignity of a Methuselah. And yet, isn't it our faith that we are supposed to live our days here on earth to the glory of God, and that he who would be greatest among us must be servant?
Civilian born with handicaps.
And if we live our lives making the most of those things, there will be new joys, there will be new satisfactions coming to us in every decade. Isn't this our faith? I have been young, now I'm old, yet have I not found the righteous forsaken. In the words of the old grammarian in Browning's poem, The Grammarian's Funeral, his friend said, but time escapes, lives now or never. He said, what's time? Leave now for dogs and apes, man has forever. It's a great thing to be able to counter advancing years with a faith like that. But let us not try to define exactly what we mean by man having forever, for we have limitations there too. Theologians have wrestled with that for centuries, and many of them would have been much better off if they'd been less ambitious, if they had followed the advice of the psalmist at least to a degree. And he said, I do not occupy myself with things that are too marvelous for me. If we live in the glow of what that faith is when we speak about living forever, we're likely to find sufficient answers to bring calm and quiet to the soul. So this is a big matter that's opened by the psalmist in the 131st Psalm, isn't it? This matter of not allowing ourselves to be frustrated by the jobs that are too big for us. And yet we're human. It's not possible just to say, I'm going to toss it out and have nothing more to do with it. If we have a particular problem that's of a giant variety, or if we have an ambition that we're afraid is a bit too big for us, I think the psalmist would counsel, and I'm sure Jesus would counsel, that we just take a bit of it at a time. If we can't get rid of it in our minds and start thinking in some other area completely, just take a piece of it here and go to work on that. For instance, we're concerned about the state of the world. Wars and rumors of wars, and an iron curtain and a bamboo curtain and a Berlin Wall, and more nations learning the wherewithal of waging nuclear warfare. What's more, there's great hunger in the world and there's great suffering in the world. And this not only produces suffering, but it also is an invitation to violence, and to make matters worse, the moral and the spiritual life is having a rough time of it. There's so much to be done. Oh Lord, the sea is so great and my boat is so small. Don't you think there are times when Jesus felt that way? Yet what happened? Look at that couple of very familiar illustrations. One when he's walking along the road and he looks up and sees little Zacchaeus and he said, come down, I want to eat with you today. I'd just like to have a talk with you. Or that other illustration where he went to the well after a long walk, and there was a woman. He had sufficient excuse that he could have just spoken to her and said something about the weather and then sat back and rested, but he didn't. He recognized her need. And he said such profound things to her that she was sure that this was Jesus Christ. You see, Jesus said, go into all the world. But he said that world begins with the first person you see that's in need, the first place that you can touch the need of the world. It's true that developing honesty, integrity in the world, this is too big for you, it's too big for me. And yet, we can develop it within ourselves, can't we? We can start there. The task facing the church at large is too big for us. Stirring nations out of their spiritual lethargy is too much for us, but we can at least attend the church of our choice in our neighborhood, and we can at least say about our own families with the one of old, "As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord." I may not be able to change the whole world, but I can do something about myself. I can do something about my family. We may not be able to do much about the tensions of the world, but we can do something about the tensions that try to overwhelm us or try to get the most of our families and our neighborhood. We may not be able to do a great deal for the people who are over in India or some other part of the world where they're starving and suffering, but we can do something right here with the institutions to which we can give through community funds and other means that will reach far beyond ourselves. No, just because we can't do everything doesn't mean that we shouldn't do something. Coming to terms with our limitations begins with a recognition of that. The crowning thought is in the last verse of this little psalm. Let Israel hope in the Lord from henceforth and forever. Don't despair, he's saying, because you haven't been able to accomplish all you want to accomplish. Don't despair because you are so burdened by limitations. Do the best you can and leave the rest to God. Kind of thing we were talking about last week in this whole matter of prayer. But thou remainest, you see. That's the note that's been struck with the great souls of the ages. I'd fainted, said the psalmist, unless I'd believed. The poet said, in all the endless roads you tread, there's nothing but the night. But the psalmist says, that's not true. There is more than the night. Hope thou in God. Nathaniel Hawthorne was discharged from his post in the Salem Customs House because of a trick of village politics. His world tumbled in, but he refused to take it as a final frustration. He wrote to a friend of his, George S. Hillard. He said, under God's guidance, I shall arrive at something better. His wife says, thank God you lost your job. I'm so happy. Now you'll be able to write that book you've been talking about. And he did. And what was the book? Out of that frustration came the scarlet letter. Life's limitations and frustrations don't have to be final. Not when it's lived against the background of hope in God. The door we wanted to go through may be closed, but another will open. The road that we're wanting to travel may have a detour sign on it. But there may be more beautiful scenery on that detour, and we may learn something there about nature and about life that we never would have gotten if we hadn't been pushed aside. It all depends on whether we let our frustrations drive us to our knees or not. I imagine that's what Jesus was thinking about when in Dr. Moffat's translation of the first Beatitude we find these words, blessed are they who feel their spiritual need, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
We presented a recording of this morning's worship service from the Shadyside Presbyterian Church, Amberson Avenue, and Westminster Place in Pittsburgh. Ministers of the church are the Reverend Dr. Howard C. Scharfe, the Reverend Dr. James R. Spear, and the Reverend J. Wayne Hanratty. Organist and choir director was Russell G. Wickman. And today's sermon by Dr. Scharfe was titled, On Coming to Terms with Our Limitations.